Ah, my dear, not all memories are gentle things. Some rest like pressed flowers in a book, fragile and sweet, while others rattle their chains in the night, demanding to be heard. You see, justice is a slow visitor. She limps, she falters, but she always knocks on the door in the end. And I remember, oh, how I remember the day pain first entered our home, and the long road we walked until justice finally found us. Would you care to sit by me and listen? The fire is warm, but the story may chill your bones.
Ah, child. Houses hold secrets longer than people do. The beams, the floorboards, even the wallpaper, all of it remembers. And our old house. Well, it remembered more than it ought to. I was just a little girl then, but I could feel it, the hush that settled over every room. It was the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace. No, it was a silence thick with warning. Like the way birds go still before a storm. I recall the long hallway with its crooked pictures and the way my mother's voice grew softer when she spoke there. She'd glance toward the stairs as though someone might be listening. Even my father, who usually thundered through the house with heavy steps, had moments when he would stop mid-stride, standing still as if debating whether to open his mouth or close it forever. And then there was that room, the one no one entered unless they had to. Its door was always closed, but not locked. I used to press my ear against the wood, hoping to hear something, anything. All I heard was the tick of the old clock at the end of the hall and the faintest groan of the boards. As though the house itself was whispering secrets I was too young to understand. The grown-ups thought they hid things well. But children always know. We feel the tension in the air, the weight behind a sigh, the way laughter comes too quickly after silence. I didn't have words for it then, but I knew something was broken in our home. Not yet shattered, but cracked. Like porcelain waiting for a fall. I used to wonder, my dear, why the lamps flickered more in that house than in any other. Perhaps it was only faulty wiring. Or perhaps the shadows had learned to dance on their own. The older I grew, the more I understood that what flickered in our home wasn't just the light, it was trust. At supper time, the table was set with bread, potatoes, and the kind of silence that fills a person fuller than food. Forks scraped against plates, but no one spoke freely. My mother's eyes always darted toward the door, as though expecting it to burst open. And when my father did speak, his voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut, but wrapped in a softness that almost sounded kind. That was the most confusing part. The warmth and the cold lived side by side, like fire and ice inside the same hearth. I began to notice things, small things, but they etched themselves into my memory. A bruise on my mother's wrist hidden beneath her sleeve. A letter she began to write and tore to pieces before finishing. The way she lingered by the window at night, still waiting for something or someone beyond the darkness. I didn't yet know the name of what haunted us. Children rarely do. We simply feel it. I felt it in the way the walls seemed to lean closer when voices rose. In the way the stairs creaked more loudly when fear lived in the house. And so, before pain fully entered, it hovered, circling us like a hawk in the distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I remember, even then, part of me knew the silence would not last forever. Every secret, no matter how deeply buried, claws its way to the surface one day. Ah, child. Every family has a night they never forget. A night when the air itself remembers. For us, it was the night the glass shattered. I can still hear it now, as clear as if it were yesterday, the sharp cry of breaking. Like a scream trapped inside a window pane. The day had been ordinary enough. My mother hummed while she shelled peas by the sink. "Kay?" And I played on the rug with my wooden doll, its face worn smooth from too much love. Evening came slow, as it always did in that house, carrying with it a heaviness that settled across our shoulders. Father's boots thudded at the door, his shadow stretching long across the wall before he stepped inside. Dinner was quiet, quieter than most. The only sound was the steady tick of the clock and the faint whistle of wind through the cracks of the window frame. Then it began. Voices rose, not in laughter, but in sharp, jagged tones that made the hair on my arms prickle. I slipped away to the hallway, hiding just beyond the kitchen's doorway. Children aren't supposed to listen. But how could I not? My mother's voice trembled, pleading. My father's voice thundered, each word heavier than the last. And then it happened, the sound of glass breaking. A plate, maybe? Cup? I never did see which, but the crash echoed down the hallway, and I felt it in my chest, as though the house itself had been struck. Silence followed, heavier than any words. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort its. I pressed my hands to my ears, but I could still hear the echoes inside me, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. When glass shatters, my dear, it never returns whole. You can piece it together, but the cracks remain, sharp and unyielding. That night carved cracks in all of us, though none of us dared admit it aloud. After the crash, I remember my mother's breath shallow, hurried like a sparrow caught in a snare. My father's silence pressed against the walls until it felt like even the lamps dimmed in fear. I stayed in the hallway, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. At last, I heard my mother's soft footsteps, sweeping, gathering the shards. The sound of porcelain scraping across the wooden floor is a sound that never left me. It was not the sound of a broken cup. It was the sound of her trying to mend the unmendable, to tidy away what could never be hidden. Later, when the house grew still, I tiptoed into the kitchen. The floor glistened with tiny splinters the broom had missed. The moonlight caught them, making them shimmer like little stars scattered across the ground. I remember kneeling down, running my fingers close but not touching, afraid of being cut. And in that moment, I understood danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits in silence, sharp and invisible, under the very soles of your feet. That night, I lay awake listening to the distant sound of weeping, muffled through walls too thin to keep secrets. And I thought to myself, if glass can break with one blow, how much longer before hearts break the same way? Words, child. They can save us, or they can bury us. But in those days, the words we needed most were the hardest to speak. So we hid them on scraps of paper in folded envelopes, in prayers whispered into pillows no one else would hear. I remember finding the first letter in my mother's sewing basket. It was written in her neat, careful hand, the ink smudged in places where her tears must have fallen. The words were simple, but they burned. We are not safe. Please help us. She never signed it. She never sent it. She tucked it away as if even asking for help was a crime. It wasn't the only one. I would stumble upon them in strange places between the pages of her cookbooks. Inside the pocket of her apron, folded beneath the flour tin. Each letter was a cry trapped in silence, scratched out in hurried ink, then hidden before my father's boots returned to the door. I didn't understand then why she never posted them. Perhaps she feared no one would believe her. Perhaps she knew the cost of being heard would be heavier than the weight of staying quiet. Fear has a way of tying knots in the throat, of making even the strongest hands tremble before opening a door to freedom. So the letters stayed, quiet witnesses, silent companions to her sorrow. And though I could not yet read them all, I felt their heaviness. Children don't need words to understand despair. We feel it in the way our mothers hold us too tightly at night, as though bracing us against a storm that never ends. A heart that holds too many secrets begins to ache. Child. It aches like an attic filled with dust, heavy with the weight of things left unsaid. And in that house the silence grew so loud it seemed to rattle in my ears. I often watched my mother at night. She would sit by the small lamp with paper in front of her, lips moving without sound. Sometimes she wrote, sometimes she only stared at the page, the pen trembling in her hand. And when she finished, she never sealed an envelope, never reached for the drawer where stamps were kept. Instead, she folded the words once, twice, and slipped them away. Another voice swallowed by fear. And when words failed her, she turned to prayers. I remember her kneeling by the bed, whispering so softly I could hardly make out the syllables. Lord, let someone see us. Let someone hear us. Her prayers were letters of their own addressed to heaven, sent with tears instead of postage. I learned then that there is nothing lonelier than speaking to walls, nothing heavier than begging for help when no one answers. Yet even in her trembling, she held hope. Fragile, yes, but it glowed in her eyes when she kissed me goodnight as though she believed. One day the silence would break, and I, too, began to wait, to listen for a knock at the door or a letter in return, or some sign that justice was more than a dream tucked away like her unsent words. But the knock did not come. Not yet. Justice, my dear, is never in a hurry. She takes the long road, limping and stumbling, but she does arrive one day when you've almost given up waiting. For us, her arrival came not with fanfare, but with a single knock at the door. I remember that morning clearly. The air was thick with the smell of rain, damp curtains clinging to the window panes. My mother had been quieter than usual, her eyes hollow as if she'd poured every last ounce of herself into surviving the night before. I was at the table tracing patterns in the condensation of my teacup. When the sound came, 3 firm raps against the wood of our front door, it startled us. Visitors were rare in our house, rarer still at that hour. My mother froze, her breath caught in her chest, and for a long moment no one moved. Then she rose, her hands trembling against her apron, and opened the door. Standing there was not family, not a neighbor, but an officer, a man in a dark coat with eyes that had seen too much sorrow. He spoke gently, almost cautiously, as though afraid his words might break the fragile air inside our home. My mother nodded, tears welling, her lips pressed tight as if she had been holding them closed for years. I didn't know then what had been said, only that the silence cracked wide open. It was the first time someone outside those walls truly stepped in, the first time the whispers of our house began to echo in another's ears. Ah, child, when justice comes, she does not arrive empty-handed. She brings relief, yes, but also scars, for no battle leaves us untouched. That day marked the end of one kind of pain and the beginning of another, the kind that lingers, the kind that hums in your bones long after the storm has passed. I recall the days that followed, a blur of whispered questions and doors opening where they had always been shut. My mother spoke at last, her voice fragile but steady, like glass that trembles yet does not break. Words poured out of her, words she had swallowed for years, and each one was like a stone lifted from her chest. Yet each stone, too, left a bruise when set down. The house felt different then, lighter in some ways, darker in others. Relief crept in, but so did the echoes of what had been endured. Neighbors who once turned their faces away now brought baskets of bread, but their eyes carried pity, and pity can sting almost as much as silence does for me. I learned that survival is not the same as healing. The walls no longer shook with thunderous voices, yet at night I could still hear the faintest crash of glass in my dreams. My mother often sat by the window, her hands folded in her lap, staring not at the street, but at the horizon, as though freedom lay somewhere beyond it. Waiting. Justice had come, yes, but she came late, limping, carrying her burden of too many stories like ours. Still, I have always believed that even a late knock is better than none at all. And so I carry this memory like a lantern in the dark, hoping it may light the path for another soul still waiting in silence. So, you see, my dear, memory is a fragile thing. It bends and it blurs, but it never forgets the nights when silence was broken or the mornings when justice finally arrived. Our pain became our teacher. Our scars became our map. And though the journey was long and cruel, I have lived long enough to tell you that no darkness lasts forever. Even the heaviest night gives way to dawn. Even the weakest voice, when spoken, can echo for generations. Perhaps that is why I share these stories now. Not to reopen wounds, but to remind you, every memory we speak aloud becomes a lantern. And somewhere, someone lost in the dark may be waiting for that small, flickering light. She pauses, her voice softening like the hush of embers fading in the hearth. If you wish to hear more of Granny's memories, subscribe and join me again. There are always more stories waiting in the shadows.